Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress, continuing the build-up towards the 2018 Candidates Tournament. The first round will be played on Saturday, March 10th. In the last video we looked at the 2013 Candidates Tournament, and in this video we'll look at the 2014 Candidates Tournament held in Khanty-Mansiysk in Siberia in Russia. These were the 8 participants. The favorite Anand-Aronian from Armenia, as you can see, he had the highest rating by far. Vladimir Kramnik from Russia, Veselin Topalov from Bulgaria was there, Anand from India was there, Karyakin and Svikler from Russia, Mamedyarov from Azerbaijan and Andreikin also from Russia. So half of the field was from the strongest chess country in the world. This is from the first report on ChessBase on the tournament back in 2014. The average rating of this event is 2770. If you are missing players like Fabiano Caruana, Alexander Grishuk, Hikaru Nakamura, the numbers 5 to 7 in the world rankings, then you should know that the qualification for the candidates was not based on rating but on other criteria. Anand qualified by virtue of being the loser of the 2013 World Championship match. That was against Magnus Carlsen, of course. Kramnik and Andreikin by being the 2 top finishers in the World Cup 2013. Topalov and Mamedyarov by being the top 2 finishers of the FIDE Grand Prix 2012 and 2013. And Aronian and Karyakin on the basis of rating. And Svikler as the organizing committee's wild card. So back in 2014 we had the same criteria on determining who would play as we have in this tournament, which will start next week. And it was Vishwanathan Anand, the great grandmaster from India, who won the 2014 candidates and qualified for a rematch against Magnus Carlsen. Here you see Anand at the prize giving after the tournament. On the left you see Kirsan Ilyumzinov, the FIDE president, and I'm not sure who the lady on the right is. It could be the mayor of Khanty-Mansiysk, maybe. This is a tournament table. Yes, a very busy chart. You may want to put the video on pause if you want to look at what happened exactly. Anand there, 8.5 out of 14. He won by a full point ahead of Sergei Karyakin, who had a great second half of the tournament. And the big favorite before the tournament was Anand-Aronian, but you can see him there in 6th position. In this video we'll look at the game from Anand, of course, and we'll look at the game from round 1, where he played the favorite with white. So white is Anand, black Aronian. It was played on the 13th of March 2014. Let's get into it. The analysis I'm using is from Anish Giri in the magazine New in Chess and from Gilberto Milos on the ChessBase website. And Giri writes, every triumph starts with the beginning, and in a chess tournament it is often that key game that determines the final outcome. In Khanty-Mansiysk this time that key game was played right in the first round. Let's have a look. Anand opens e4, e5 from Aronian, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, we are in the Ruy Lopez, the Spanish opening, a6, bishop back, knight f6, Anand castled, bishop e7, rook e1, b5, kicking the bishop again, bishop back to b3, Aronian castled, h3, bishop b7, d3, and now Aronian plays the famous Marshall gambit, d7, d5, sacrificing a pawn. Anand took on d5, knight takes, and instead of taking on e5 straight away with the knight, Anand played knight bd2. And he had played it before against Fabiano Caruana and he lost that game, so he must have found an improvement on that game. Taking on e5 straight away is fine as well. Queen d7, and Anish Giri calls this an interesting novelty in the spirit of the opening. The game Anand Caruana from 2013 went as follows: f6 instead of queen d7, c3, king h8, and black won this game. Queen d7 was a novelty. Now Anand decided to take the pawn, knight takes e5, knight takes, and rook takes. White has won a pawn, but black has compensation. Here Aronian played knight f6. After only 8 seconds, And Geary says it's quite dramatic to play a novelty and miss a spectacular knight sacrifice 2 moves later. What he meant was that black can play knight f4 here. Then white plays knight f3, and there comes a knight sacrifice. Knight takes g2, king takes, and a5. The threats are a4, another threat is rook a6 to swing the rook over, and black will attack the white king. Good attacking chances for black. But Aronian did not see this possibility or did not like it very much, and as said, he played knight f6 here. Rook e1, it gets an exclamation mark from the analyzing grandmasters, from Milos, and he says the exclamation mark is not so much for the move as it is for the entire plan used by Anand to try to refute black's idea. Let's have a look how Anand tries and refutes it. Rook ae8 from Aronian, knight f3, bishop d6, bishop e3, and now rook e7. Geary writes that Aronian took his time here, but in fact it's a little too slow. In general, Aronian is comfortable playing a pawn down, so he probably didn't need to hurry, and Geary gives knight d5 as more powerful, with the idea of taking on e3 at the appropriate moment. So he felt the move played by Aronian in the game, rook e7, was a bit too slow. d4 from Anand, rook fe8, c3, and again Geary likes knight d5 more, but he says Aronian doesn't see the threat. Aronian played h6, and now we see Anand's idea. Knight e5 with another exclamation mark, and this is the key to white's strategy. Give the pawn back to simplify into an endgame with the 2 bishops. A slight risk-free advantage for white, as the grandmasters analyze. Bishop takes e5, d takes e5, rook takes e5, and now black has won the pawn back, but he'll face an endgame against the 2 bishops. Queen takes d7, knight takes d7, rook ed1, and Aronian played knight f6, and Geary writes, after this move black is in big trouble. It was played instantly, and Geary believes here this was a moment for a 40-minute think by Aronian, and if he had done that he might have come up with a better move, knight c5, and for example bishop takes, rook d7, and rook e2, with counterplay and good chances of holding this position even though the f7 pawn will fall. Also bishop c6 here instead of knight f6 was a better option for black according to Anish Geary. After rook ed1, knight f6 was played, and c4, another exclamation mark. And now Aronian took this 40-minute think, but it was too late. He played c6, but both analysts agree that black is already in big trouble here. White has a nice little advantage based on the bishop pair and the weakness of the black queenside pawns. Let's see how Anand plays this. He shows great technique. Rook ac1, rook 5 e7, and a4, putting some extra pressure on the queenside pawns. b4 is not good here because the pawn will get lost there. Aronian took on c4, bishop takes, and knight d5. Geary writes, such passive, ugly positions are rarely tenable. Bishop c5, hitting the rook, rook e4, and f3. Anand's play is very natural and instructive. He pulls his bishops back and activates his rook, as we'll see. Rook 4 to e5, king f2. Milos writes here that the bishops control the entire board. Bishop c8, bishop f1, and Geary writes, in the style of Karpov. Sweet, he calls it. Rook 5 e6, Rook d3, Knight f4 hitting the Rook, Rook b3. The weaknesses on the queen side are decisive. Black is just lost here. Rook d8, Bishop e3, Knight d5, and Bishop d2, pulling back the second bishop, and now nothing can stop the invasion with either Rook b8 or Rook b6, as we see in this game. These two pawns are very, very weak. Knight f6 from Aronian, Bishop a5 hitting the Rook, and if you play Rook d4, then there is Rook b8. The bishop is hanging and cannot play because of the pin. So you have to play a Rook back, Rook e8, but then Rook takes c6, and this is winning for white. After Bishop a5, Aronian did not play Rook d4, he played Rook d e8. And Rook b6, as said from Anand, and now white wins a pawn. Rook e5 hitting the bishop, bishop back to c3 hitting the Rook, Knight d5, and Anand showed later that Rook takes c6 is also technically winning, but he decides to go for the idea of trapping the knight. This is going to be fun. So after Knight d5 he did not take on c6, he played Bishop takes e5, taking the Rook, but Black can take the Rook on b6. But now White has an idea of trapping that knight. Let's see how that goes. He played Bishop d4, and if you now play Knight d5, then White takes that pawn. So Aronian took on a4, but now he will get his knight trapped. Rook takes c6 came as well, and now you can see that this poor knight on a4 has no squares. All these squares are controlled by White. Rook d8, Aronian made the time control. This is move 40, and is coming up with some tricks, but Anand calculates everything perfectly. Aronian is always full of tricks, but it's very interesting to see how Anand refutes these tricks. He plays Rook c4, threatening to win that piece on a4. The knight is trapped. Bishop d7 protects the knight. b3, and now it looks like White will indeed win that piece, but there's still Bishop b5, Rook b4, and Knight b2. Very nice move, because if you take the piece, then Black is back in the game with Rook d2 check, a Rook fork, check, and attacking the bishop. King e3, Rook takes b2, Bishop takes b5, A takes b5, and Black should be able to hold this Rook endgame. So Knight b2 was a very nice try from Aronian, but Anand found the refutation. He took on b5, A takes b5, and now you still have to be very careful because King e2 looks logical, but it is a mistake because of Knight c4. Another tricky move, because if you take that knight, your bishop on d4 is suddenly unprotected. So after A takes b5, Anand had to be careful. He played King e3, and now Knight c4 does not work because the bishop is protected. And after Rook Knight d1 check, there is King e2, and now White will finally win this poor knight. After King e3, Aronian played Rook e8 check, King d2, Rook d8, and King c3. And here Levon Aronian resigned because White is going to pick up that knight. If Knight d1 check, then there is King c2, and again the knight has no squares. A very nice mirroring line of the line we just saw with Knight d1 and King e2. In this case it's Knight d1 and King c2. And Giri calls this quite pretty, and I'm sure we all agree. Here you see both players in the press conference after the game. Aronian looks distraught and Anand doesn't look very happy, but I'm sure inside he was absolutely delighted. A great start of the tournament for him, and it was not such an exciting tournament as the year before, when all sorts of things were happening in the last few rounds. Anand took the lead from the start and never relinquished it, and qualified for the second match against Magnus Carlsen, which was played later at the end of 2014 in Sochi, also in Russia. In the next video we'll look at the 2016 Candidates Tournament, which was won by Sergei Karyakin. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel. Please leave a comment. You also may want to check out my Chess to Progress channel. I have lots of series there on tactics, on endgames, on classics from the past and the present, and over 50 videos on viewers' games. Viewers send me their games by email and I analyze them for that Chess to Progress channel. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.